What's up, guys? Ethan here.
Aiden.
We're just here. We're chatting. First time chatting about some stuff we've been seeing, been talking about. If it goes well, we'll do it again if you guys like it. If it sucks, it'll die. It'll never happen ever again. You'll never see anything else about it.
Yep. So we've been sitting here, got a lot on our minds, and we decided today we want to talk a little bit about force plates.
Yeah, so a lot of people are using force plates right now. They're collecting all this data, but not actually knowing what to do with it.
Yeah, all this data that comes at you in all sorts of different ways. It spits out graphs and charts and force curves and all this overwhelming stuff, right? If we don't know how to interpret it or even just view it, we might not be able to take full advantage of what these force plates provide for us.
Yeah, it kind of just turns into expensive noise. Our force plates, they should be used as a tool, not just some trophy to say, hey, we've got them. The whole purpose of testing is to gather all this data, obviously, but we want to create a baseline and from there either see if we're improving or most importantly, we're not getting any worse.
Right, we want to get that baseline because it just gives us a context or starting point for where our athletes are at. It's good for numbers, but it's also important to have these important conversations with our athletes, not just about performance, but maybe some injury prevention, some diet, some lifestyle hacks that they can use to enhance their lives and their performance when they're in here with us.
Exactly. The purpose of having the data is to use it, not just to collect the numbers, but to actually help us make informed, applied, healthy coaching decisions.
All right, so talking point number one we got right here, common problem. Okay, so we see a lot in these programs. We see these force plate testings may be programmed once a month, once every 4 to 6 weeks, and it's kind of all over the place.
Yeah, it can look really structured. It sounds structured, once a month, every 4 weeks, but that's kind of an issue. You think like you can catch an athlete on the wrong day when they're sore, they're tired, stressed, they're not recovered enough, and you end up getting bad data.
Right. We need this data to be 100, as close to 100% as we can. So we need it super structured, super planned, because if we get the wrong numbers, then it's going to be all out of sorts, and we're going to give them the wrong stuff.
Exactly. So, checkpoint, mini checkpoint. If we do 1 day of testing, have a testing day, we could be sore, we could be tired. There's some scheduling issues, practice, games, competition, all of that stuff, and then you end up getting bad data and you make poor coaching decisions. We want to avoid that. All right, section number 2, testing frequency and context. Now, obviously, how often you test depends on the setting.
Right. So let's say I'm in a college football weight room, right? I got 100, 120 athletes that I see every week, right? I'm not going to be able to test every single one of them each week. It's not realistic.
Yeah. But in a private sector, like where we're at, or smaller team settings, softball, baseball, golf, something like that, testing frequently, it's not only realistic, but it's ideal.
Right. When this testing becomes part of the training process that we get into a routine with, instead of its own event, it just becomes data that we can use over the course of time, right? So if we're here, we got a college team, maybe let's go test monthly, somewhere around the 4 to 6 range, somewhere where you have some time, right? But over here, if we're in the private sector, it's super easy and reliable to go weekly, and we can just embed it into our natural programming.
Yeah. All right, section 3, what tests to use. Testing doesn't have to be complicated. Think every week we can hit 1 isometric, 1 jump, and 1 hop test a week. And we're going to get more value than we would just having 1 big giant testing day every month.
Right, so let's go over and take a look at some of the main ones we like to use.
So for jumps, we like counter movement jump, squat jump, or vertical jump. Those are probably the most common. Great for measuring elastic strength, concentric power, and just overall output.
Mm-hmm. And then we got the good old hop test over here. All right, so hop test is basically just 6 pogos in a row, boom, 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 tracking that RSI, seeing how quick we can get up, get out.
On the strength side, we like to do some sort of isometric pull. So it could be a mid-thigh pull. It's one of the best tests for just pure force production.
If you got throwers or any throwing sport athletes like baseball, softball, so on and so forth, if they have a history of like elbow or shoulder issues, a perfect isos, a belt squat, right? So you got no strain or any pressure on those shoulders or joints up here. It's just all lower legs.
Yeah, and we'll also use like a Nord board for hamstring strength or asymmetry tracking. That's a good one to throw in. Pretty common college NFL setting.
Mm-hmm. And for the upper body, we like right here, we like these plyo push-ups a lot, right? So you get there, boom, pressing all that force into the ground, trying to get as high up in the air. It's good for shoulder control. We like these prone I, Ys, and Ts. Good for some shoulder strength. See where we're at. Really good for our throwing athletes like baseball.
So somewhere around here, here's what these tests could look like: a counter movement, a hop test, plyo push-up, prone I and T. It'll be somewhere around here, and they're right here.
Force plate menu.
Boom.
That's right.
All right, so now here's a practical way to structure testing. Again, we don't need to test all of these on the same day. We can spread it out throughout the week.
Right, you can kind of naturally embed it into that training week so we don't waste any time and be as efficient as possible, right? So what we like to do, we wrote here, weekly flow, okay? So this is what we like to do here. We get going with a warm-up, okay? Get the blood flowing, body moving, prime the CNS, prime the body for what we're about to do, right? Then we get into our first test. We always start with the jump test, right? It's usually more taxing. Get a counter movement jump, squat jump, whatever we decide, whatever you guys like better, okay? Then after that, we go into the isos, a little less taxing, get a belt squat, get a mid-thigh pull, something to get that isometric going. And then we move into the last testing. We get the upper/shoulder test, right? So we get plyo push-up, we get prone IYTs, kind of just get some upper body numbers.
Yeah, and we can even like contrast this into our programming so it doesn't have to feel like it's a dedicated block. We can, same way we would pair a squat with a jump variation, we can do the exact same thing during the warm-up sets. Hit your warm-up set, and then we're hitting a jump test or something like that. Same thing with isometrics. We can mix it in on one of our pull days, something like that.
Right, and it kind of prevents us from having to dedicate one whole training day for just testing, right? So let's say we have Wednesdays is just testing. We miss out on a whole day of jumping or running or strength training, whatever it is that we can improve other facets other than just saying, hey, let's test to see where we're at. It kind of builds a natural momentum into it so we get all in one, kind of helps us flow a little more effectively.
Yeah, time is limited. We only get so much time with our athletes, so we need to be as efficient as we possibly can. So finding a way to implement this in a way that works with our training structure.
That's right. All right, so this next section we want to talk about is the frequency and why it matters, right? So the biggest factor on why we need to be really good with our frequency is because it gives us a more consistent and a better data trend to better communicate between us as coaches and then the athlete themselves.
Yeah, and also the sport coaches. Like, it's not just for us. Like, we can take our data, what we're seeing, and we can talk to the sport coaches and athletic trainers, kind of nip it in the butt as we see it.
Right. So, for example, if we're doing our testing and we see some force output dropping or any asymmetries start to rise that may lead to concerns, we can have that conversation between us as well as their other coaches and them. Maybe it's saying, let's say we got Johnny coming in, he's a baseball player, and let's say, hey, can we limit Johnny's base running to 4 times this week rather than 6, right? Just little things like that.
Yeah, and it could also just be like, hey, can we get Johnny checked out before this turns into a real injury? And like, that's where the value of the data comes in, is it allows us to make smarter, more informed decisions before it's actually too late.
Right.
All right, so something that's really important, and we try to communicate and keep ourselves grounded here, is that the force plates, they don't replace anything that we're already doing. This testing doesn't change anything from the work standpoint that we're already doing.
Right. So kind of think about it as it's all supplemental, right? It doesn't replace anything. It's just additional stuff to help us with our other work, right? Such as acceleration work, max velo sprints, broad jumps, verts, med ball tosses. That's still foundational parts of performance testing, and we don't ignore it or replace it with these force plates. We use that force plate to help us see where we need to do to help those.
Yeah, and all they're helping us do is help us make more informed decisions based on what the numbers are telling us. There's a lot of things that we can't see with the naked eye that the force plates can pick up, and we can, again, going back to the injury standpoint, like we can see those things now having that resource at our fingertips.
Right. It's not force plates versus field tests. It's more of how can these force plates help us with these field tests, right? It's not a replacement. It's more of like hindsight to see what we need to adjust as coaches and what we need to communicate with our athletes.
Yeah. How can we do our job better?
Right. All right. So the next issue when it comes to these force plate testings, some people know it as asymmetry traps. Some people know it as asymmetry cycles. It's kind of the same thing, which we kind of run into with this once a month testing.
Yeah. So, we test something and we see 15% asymmetry. So protocol, we're like, all right, we're going to prescribe a month of single leg work. And then we test again the next month and bilateral strength drops. Asymmetry's gone, bilateral strength drops.
Right. So it's kind of like this merry-go-round, kind of like a seesaw back and forth, right? You switch because now you have to address that bilateral deficiency, right? So now you have to program everything to fix that, but you're going back and forth because the next time you test, more than likely, you're going to find those asymmetries again, going back to the single leg work.
Yeah, so that's kind of the advantage of frequently testing. We get smaller, more consistent feedback, so we can make these little micro adjustments instead of big overreactions. It could just be, okay, we saw an asymmetry, let's do a bunch of single leg work for a week, and then we'll get back to our regular bilateral week. All right, so wrapping everything up, here's our little summary. At the end of the day, force plates, they're one of the best tools we have as coaches.
Right, but it's only as good as the user, right? So it's only good if we actually use this data instead of just throwing it out the window. It's only useful if we know what we're looking for.
Yeah, these aren't like a trophy. It's not something we just have to have. So when using them, we need to keep it simple, can't get lost in the data. We need to test often. And then with what we're seeing, we need to apply what we're learning and what we're seeing in all of our athletes.
Right. These force plates, they don't make us a better coach automatically, right? What makes us a better coach is using this data, understanding this data, and how to apply it to better help our athletes and get results, right? So for basic summary to wrap everything up, KISS acronym, right? Keep it simple, stupid, right? Boom. Test often, frequent, not just once a month, once every 6 weeks, weekly, whatever fits in your schedule, do that, right? Don't just diagnose one day for testing, or else we're just wasting a whole day, right? And don't just throw that data out the window, right? Apply what you learn and use that data to help our athletes and become a better facility, getting those results quicker and better.
So yeah, force plates, they're useful
They're dope.
if we make them useful.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right.